This is Geek Gab with your host, Dornall and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Monday, December 11th, 2023. Dornall, the year is almost over.
Isn't it? We made it.
I, I I'm excited for the year being almost over.
Why's that?
I don't, 2023's been kind of a you know, burning dumpster fire as far as years go.
I'll say.
I mean, uh, it's just
It's had its ups and
personally for
downs.
me.
My ups have been very up, if that makes
That's
any
true.
sense.
You've had a great year. So that's for you personally. 2023 has been a good year. I've had a really rough year, but it's been picking up the last week or so, and so it looks like 2024 will be a really good year for me. So I'm excited for the next year. That's why I'm looking forward to this year kicking off. Be like 2023, you know, bye. Have a good time. Go away now. I will not
uh,
miss it.
do you have any plans for the upcoming holidays?
Um, well, my family's getting together on Christmas. Um, and I'm at that point in family get-togethers where my job is to show up. Other, other people do the planning, other people do the food, and I just have to wake up and get ready, and even other people do the driving at this point because I ride in the carpool. So everybody is just happy that I'm there and I'm, you know, not detained by other negative events again. And you know what I'm talking about
Yep.
because there have been previous events that have detained me from going to family gatherings. So they're just happy that I'm able to be there. Um, so that's it. That's a really nice spot to be in, actually.
I
Uh,
believe it.
I sh- I show up, everybody's happy, and I don't have to worry.
Hey, real quick before we
Um,
get to our guest, uh, do you want a pocket review of the monster movie, or are you gonna get a chance to see that over the holidays?
I'm not going to get a chance to see the monster movie, but I am watching Monarch. Um, do you remember the like little sequence of Godzilla movies that they've been making, like Godzilla and King Kong and Godzilla versus King Kong, and all in like kind of this shared universe thing?
Mm-hmm.
They made a Apple Plus TV series that's set in the same universe concerning the Monster Hunter agency called Monarch: The Legacy of Monsters. Um, and it's running now on Apple TV. They post one episode every like Wednesday or Thursday or something. So I just started watching it this week. I've been catching up with one episode every day. Um, so emphatically does not have King Kong so far. Godzilla was in it for a little bit. Um, and I am watching the series. I will be able to have a review of that. But the movie you saw was made by Tojo and Company, who invented Godzilla and have all the rights to Godzilla. And they made a movie a couple of years ago called Shin Godzilla, which was apparently a big hit. And this movie is called Godzilla Minus One. It's set in the same continuity, but it's actually older. It's actually sort of a prequel to Shin Godzilla, from what I understand.
Yeah, I don't know about Shin Godzilla, but yeah, it's called Godzilla Minus One. Um, it is set, before Godzilla. It begins before Godzilla actually mutates. It's the story of a kamikaze pilot who obviously didn't do his job, and he encounters Godzilla, and then after the war, uh, Godzilla rises up and does its thing to Tokyo, and the kamikaze pilot and a bunch of other veterans band together to try to defeat Godzilla and drive him off. Um, my capsule review is that it is an excellent movie. Go see it. Um, the only the only caveat I would give is that if you're not familiar with sort of Japanese, the way they emote, the acting might be a little strange to you. But I promise you, this story is excellent.
All right. Um, I have heard nothing but praise for the movie from every everyone on online movie reviewers. Um,
Well deserved. Best movie of the year. Right on time. Outstanding film.
and I don't know how many more episodes of Monarch there is, but I'll deliver my uh, my review of it at the end. It's got, and I hate myself already because it's been a rough day sleep wise, but it's got Snake Plissken in it. Um, and he and his son play the same character like uh 50 years apart. So his son, who was a US agent or the fake replacement Captain America in uh the Winter Soldier and the Falcon Disney series. Uh and he was also in some other things before Kurt Russell. Is that who
Kurt
Snake
Russell.
Plissken is?
Hmm.
Okay. And he was also in some other stuff before I knew that he was Kurt Russell's son. Um, he is, uh, he plays the same character as a young man that Kurt Russell plays as an old man. So, although really Kurt Russell himself is quite old now, but he doesn't look it. You can't tell that he's old. He just refuses to look old. And he literally plays Santa Claus in a couple of movies, I think on Netflix. Um, and they're pretty good movies. I enjoyed them. But you you put a big silver hair on him and a big silver beard, and he's supposed to look old, and he just refuses to look old. I don't know how that works. Um,
he's he's gifted.
so, anyways, I still have to watch the fifth episode, which is the most recent one to come out, and I'm sure it's going to go to like 8 or 9 episodes. And when I'm done, I'll I'll do a review of it.
That sounds good. Um, our guest has arrived. We sent him running to fetch a shield. Shall we bring him in?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the show, Douglas Cole of Gaming Ballistic.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Jason.
It's been a minute since we've had you on.
It
First of
has.
all,
It has. At least a year.
at least uh, it's like a year, an annual or semi-annual thing.
Yeah.
Biannual, maybe. Uh, but I heard you got a Kickstarter out. I love catching up with all the stuff you've been doing, so I'm excited to sort of get get down and hear about what you want to talk about. But first, as you know, on the Geek Gab, we talk about what we want to talk about. So, did you see Godzilla yet?
No, I haven't been out to see a movie in quite a while. Trying to think of the last one that I actually saw in the theater. I actually can't remember. Uh, do. Yeah,
It's
no, it.
like that for a lot of people, huh?
Yeah, part of it is when I'm a full-time publisher now. I'm trying to remain so. That's questionable. Um, but my wife is the for 20 some odd years I was the travel guy and had the big job and blah blah blah. And then in summer 2020 that changed. But my wife has sort of taken my place as the wearer of man pants, I suppose I should say. But she's the earner and she's doing great, and that lets me take care of the kids and do full time game publishing. But what that means is that I don't get out a lot because I'm taking care of my two school age children, um, and doing the stuff from my office, and it's
Oh, that's a great update. I love to hear that things are going well for you in a way that lets you do because I mean, yeah, when we first started talking to you, you were really getting on the ground floor of your publishing business, Gaming Ballistic. That's gamingballistic.com for anyone who's listening. And and yeah, you've over the past few years, you've done a ton of learning about the industry and running the business and everything like that.
Yeah, I
Um,
seem to have figured out every possible mistake that can be made. So that's hopefully hopefully useful. If I can,
uh,
the economy is real hard right now, and because at the moment I am a purveyor of third-party everything, whatever I do is for some other set of core rules. I not entirely joke that I am the most discretionary of discretionary income, because if you have the core rules and you're relatively uh, apt, you don't need supplemental material to have fun with role playing game. It's one of the great things about the hobby. It makes it a rough business to be in at times, um, because I want people to want my stuff. I want people to like my stuff. I'm gonna shoot myself in the foot here. Nobody needs my stuff, right? You people who buy the old school essentials core rules, or the TFT core rules, or the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game or GURPS core rules, or 5e, or my Dragon Heresy book. So I do sort of have core rules, um, but anyone who buys those things can then play forever with just that material. Um, and so when times get sticky, uh, then it gets
mm,
a little rough.
I get it. Well, I mean, I don't need this candy bar that I just had for dessert, but I got it anyway.
Right, but and that's the thing is that what I'm hoping for is that I establish enough of a rep for a good quality product, that people decide that yes, when they have discretionary income to spend, that they will forego said candy bar and dip into my product pool. But the over every whenever I've done an estimate of, okay, how many backers or how many whatever for the last 12 to I'd say 12 to 15 or 12 to 18 months. Things have come up between 20 and 30% lower than what when they say past performance is no guarantee of future results, they're talking about my last year.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Inflation has hit everybody's income because food and stuff, the essentials have gotten so expensive that it's a lot harder to sell things. It has nothing to do with the quality of your product or even the interest in your product. People just have less money to buy things.
Yeah, and obviously I'm pro me, but I agree with quality. I don't think that I'm doing anything different than I have. I think in some cases I'm getting better than I have. That's what learning is for. But in terms of interest and people's ability to convert interest into sales for me, it's been rough. And on this flip side, it's been rough for me, but it hasn't been rough for everybody, right? There have been some spectacularly successful uh, projects recently um, that show if you've got the goods, people come for it, but it needs to be the right set of goods. And I am still trying to figure out what that means for me.
Are you thinking in particular? There's two really big Kickstarters this year. Axe and what was the other one? I'm drawing a blank because I don't care. Um,
But there was was that last year? Let me see. Dolman Wood was big. So Axe was big. Dolman Wood, the Gavin's uh, setting turned into RPG for old school essentials. Shadow Dark was huge.
oh, that's the one I was
14,000
thinking
backers or
of.
something
Yeah.
like that. Yep.
I
Yeah.
never even heard of Dolmenwood or Shadow Dark.
Well, Shadow Dark had it closed with 13,000 backers and I think over $1 million. Um, Dolmenwood did I think that may have did 1.3 million, 10,862 backers and $1.4 million for Dolmenwood. So
Wow.
considering I believe Gavin and Kelsey are both one man or one woman shops, they did very well with hitting the market with the right product at the right time. But no, both of those are role playing games. They're both core rules. And Dolmenwood is slightly modified old school essentials, so it scratches that OSR niche. Um, Shadow Dark, from what I've seen, I like it quite a bit. It's got some 5e to it. It's got some old school sensibility. It does not have kind of the geometric more progression. There was a clever bit of advancement that way that gets you out of the 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 gold pieces or whatever that just climbs and climbs and climbs. So I feel like the progression in Shadow Dark is a lot more akin to the fantasy trip or some aspects of GURPS where you're always vulnerable because you don't have that scope creep where hit points go up and up and up, or resilience or some sort goes up and up and up. You can always die. So Shadow Dark straddles the line between some of the more interesting swift mechanics of modern game design, and then also harkens back to some of the uh, play style of earlier games. And having heard Kelsey speak to how she came up with the mechanics and where she went, she is quite learned and has played all the editions and studied them and looked at them and whatever. So was definitely not a case, I feel, where she was just like, oh, I know better than everyone. She knows this stuff because she studied it and she played it and she picked the stuff that she liked and rejected the stuff that she didn't and combined it well into a nice set. So I have nothing but appreciation for uh, her design ethic, and I saw her talk to Tenkar, and I've seen her. I just think she's super cool, right? Everything that I've seen, and like even when she was trying to figure out how to tame the tiger of the spectacularly successful Kickstarter, because I mean, when Steve Jackson Games first did their big Ogre box set Kickstarter, it was wildly successful, and they kept adding stretch goals, and they kept doing more and more and more, and I think they finally fulfilled them, but it was years because they bit off more than they can chew with the and we'll do this and and we'll do this because that was expected of Kickstarter. And when she had the tiger by the tail and was riding it, I was on the Shadow Dark Discord server, and I was, I'd done, this was her first. I mean, she's been in this game for a long time, so even if she was new to crowdfunding, she was not new to game design and all that. But like things like the backer kit interface, which can be arcane, I was like, oh, hey, if you do this, or if you send a note to backer kit, they will enable this tool, and this will, make this thing that you're trying to do happen much more quickly. And she was super friendly and super accepting of a little bit of help. So it was great. Gavin has been very supportive of what I'm doing. He puts my Kickstarters in his newsletter. And that kind of reach matters because mine is limited. If there's one, I may be a pretty good editor and do okay with layout and art direction. I've got a great art team, but seem to be a little worse at marketing than I need to be for a successful business owner. That is not an issue. Every lame-o to send me even more spam. Oh my God, this last few days has been awful. I can't tell you how many of these stupid your Facebook account is about to be suspended for whatever. I've gotten more of those stupid spam emails than I have backers in the damn campaign.
Wow.
Monty Cook, who's been doing Kickstarters since like before anybody, his campaigns do about every $200,000 they'll have another have another goal. So they really seriously manage contributions, and so I see Kickstarters doing where people are doing like every $10,000, and then they'll add like, oh, and we'll do a deluxe embossed cover if we get $10,000 more dollars. I'm like, dude, you do not want to do that. $10,000 is not. I mean, maybe the money works out that that's actually still a money maker for you. I don't know, but you do not want to
I
lard
can
up
jump in
your
there on some of
Kickstarter.
that. Some of that is so there are critical fulcrum points. There are inflection points in a campaign, and one of those is, so I do a lot of my printing, like these books for TFT and whatever. I do a lot of my printing at Mixam for various reasons. But there's a crossover point, usually somewhere between 300 and 700 copies, when it is cheaper to go offset in Eastern Europe than it is to do print on demand. And once that happens, as a publisher, you get more for less because the marginal cost of each copy at that point goes down by quite a bit. It can go down by a factor of 5 once you balance out the low setup cost of print on demand with the high per copy cost. There's a crossover with the high setup cost of offset and the low marginal cost. Once those, once those cross over, it pays to go to offset. if your backers will permit you to take the time to do so, because it's months longer to do all of that and deliver. But usually they're happy to, because very frequently it's, assuming that your book has enough pages to make it worthwhile. And I know that Phil Reed thinks that the number of pages you need to make a hardcover worthwhile is one. He really likes hardcovers. That's not a detriment. That's not a derision of Phil. He really likes hardcovers and he likes to make hardcover books, which is great. But once you flip over to that point, usually, like if I have a 100-page book and I'm like, okay, I think this is worth a hardcover. Once I go to offset, it's cheaper to do a sewn binding, so it lasts freaking forever, and a hardcover. It's going to be pretty much cheaper to do it that way than it is to do the print on demand with the um, uh, I'm blanking, the glued cover. Not saddle stitch, the other one, and I'm blanking on it, but that's okay.
Well, I say I like my books like I like my women hardcover and on demand.
There you go. But the thing is you can't do that. You can't, right? I mean, print on demand hardcover will cost you $26 a book for sewn binding. And if your book is thick enough that you're going to put a hardcover on it, you don't want perfect bound because the pages could fall out. So you want it sewn and you want that hardcover to last because people are going to be paying all of a sudden 30, 40, 50, 60 bucks for it. They want it to be durable. They want it to be bulletproof. And so you're going to want to sew it. And like Mixon will sew a hardcover for your print on demand, but it will cost you like $25 to do that. Whereas, with an offset print run, your cost per book, including the hardcover, is like $6. And I'm thinking of one particular page count and page size and blah blah blah. It's all variable, but the point is that there are points, and it's usually not necessarily that many backers or that much money, where you can transition to some pretty good production values. Uh, if you can manage it, and part of managing it is handling the freight, getting it from wherever it is to the United States and or any intermediate shipping hubs. And my experience with that on my big Dungeon Fantasy Bestiary, it was nightmarish. Um, if things can go wrong, they will in the freight process, both before and after. During the COVID and post pandemic, immediate post pandemic, before the supply chain had settled somewhat, it was truly nightmare. It was awful. It's better than it has been now. I was recently able to send a couple of small packages to the United Kingdom for 40 or 50 bucks, where before it would cost 150 just to get it there. And so
Brutal.
things are starting to. Oh, it was awful, right? I mean, but it's starting to but you get better at it, right? And the world is starting to get better at it as well. And so, uh, anyway, so sorry, that's a lot of inside baseball on some of this stuff, but I like talking about the nuts and bolts of moving things around.
Oh, clearly, and we're happy to
What
oblige.
I'm just saying, watching a lot of Kickstarters and participating in a lot of Kickstarters, you every time you add something, it adds another source that you have to get something from, and each source has its own complications.
That's
Like
correct. You're complicating the supply chain. Absolutely.
if you get a cloth map, you have to find people who can make a cloth map for you and who will do it on time and who will get it to you on time. And if you want to make a set of metal pins of your iconic characters, then you have to
Right.
find another source for those. And if you want to make lead miniatures, et cetera, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So
And
when I
yeah.
see people who do new um, new stretch goals every $10,000 or $15,000, I'm just thinking, guys, I'm sure the math on the money works out on paper, but you are adding so much more work. You are adding so much more time to it that and unknowns unknown
Yep.
problems that can happen, that you're just, a lot of the stretch goals that Monte Cook Games, and I'm saying that because uh, I've been a customer of theirs a long time, and even if I don't buy their products, I kind of watch their Kickstarters because they're really good at it. They
Right.
fulfill on time. They make high quality product. I mean, like the physical product they make is fabulous. So they know where to get stuff sourced from. They've been doing it for a long time. But I forgot what I was going to say now. But anyways, I watch their
Presumably, you were going to
Kickstarters.
say that they manage the complexity well.
Yeah, they do. They manage the complexity well, and um, a lot of the stretch goals they have are additional content to rule books
Right.
or additional rule books, and so that is, you know, that doesn't require a whole new layer of complexity in sourcing. That's
Right.
just, more from the same printer. That's just another book. And so, yeah, there's a lot of s- setup cost when you're doing a whole new book, to get that set up by the printer, but it's not also, um, you're still working with the same printer. You're still working with the same, process of getting the source files
No, that's
created.
right. And
And
when I do my printing and stuff, I have done anywhere between. I guess there have been a couple times when I've only done one book, but I usually do several. At most, I've done five. Uh, I did that twice, where I did 5 books at once. And for some other products, I've done one. But Yeah, so hitting the same supplier multiple times, especially in their core competency, is always going to be much less difficult than hitting 3 or 4 different. God forbid you need to hit multiple suppliers for one product, right? So if you need someone who's going to do the art and sort of an insert, and then somebody else is going to make the pins and the buttons, and you have to get those combined, right? That could be as many as 3 people or 3 businesses, and then you're just waiting for something to break, right? Um,
yeah,
so yeah, so the number of interfaces is I was an engineer for a long time. The complexity of your product is based on the number of interfaces, and that's usually where things go wrong. Um, there's a reason planes have issues on takeoff and landing and not usually in level flight, right? That's where the most things are changing. That's where the most complexity happens. Um, so yeah, when I do my stuff, I haven't yet done um, a cloth or rubber mat, but I know who I go to because the same people who print my cards, my quick reference cards, do mats. I keep asking them if they're ever going to do cardboard tokens, and their answer is mostly no, uh, for various reasons that have to do with the equipment. Um, but because it's big specialized stuff, but yeah, so I can hit if I ever have cause to do a mat. Um, I know where I'll go, and I frequently have cause to do cards because people like these. Let's see, where's my deck of cards? I have one right here. Um, I do these quick reference cards for the fantasy. I've done them for GURPS, the Fantasy Trip, and Old School Essentials here. And this is a box of that one. So got the figure on the back, and stats on the front, with some equipment and whatever. But this is something that you can put down in front of you as you're running a game, so you don't have to flip back and forth from your adventure, sort of thing. And people seem to dig these.
Oh, that's
So
cool stuff. People
yeah,
love the toys. People love having stuff that they can touch and push around. And
they do. They do. I'm also started to get a little bit into virtual tabletop assets, but because I'm not a code guy, that requires a lot of help from other people, and I have that help in the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game space. So I've been able to offer actually the first VTT packs in that ecosystem. Steve Jackson Games hasn't gone that way, but I got permission to do it, and I have a my big Nordlander Bestiary 200-page hardcover here, and that's the monster manual for my Humgrum setting for DFRPG. But it's also got 3 small expansion books, which add about 120 extra pages of critters. I think 60 pages on snakes, snake-like organisms like, coatl or uh, dulcet. See, let me get it right. Dulcitum, totally unique snake lord guy. Not an homage at all. Um, and stuff like that. And then I have the Bugstiary, which is I think 48 pages of insect and arthropod type creatures, and then Garden of Evil, which is 16 pages of plants, almost all of which have literary reference, whether it's Lovecraft or Little Shop of Horrors or Tolkien or whatever. So that was an extra. Anyway, we did a VTT pack for that as well.
well, that's cool. And you know, we've been talking a bit, and we haven't officially introduced the thing that you're working on. Which sort of put all of this in context, because you've been doing all this work and all this learning for years, and you actually have a new book out on Kickstarter right now.
I do. It's actually it launched last Thursday. So we're about 4 days in, 11 to go, or thereabouts. We're about 86% funded. The books, 3 of them, are called. It's called Old School Setting Isle of Cedra, and Cedra is the first sort of public viewing of what I call the Infinite Archipelago. And what these are going to be is a series of small settings, not exactly micro settings, but small settings. Cedra itself is I want to say it's like 40 or 50,000 square miles as the island. Um, but it's big enough to hold a lot of adventure, but small enough and contained enough that the game master and the players could travel all over it, doing interesting things and interacting with the different factions. I ran a Cedra campaign for the fantasy trip, but my experience, take it or leave it, has been that people don't really go for project Kickstarters, whatever you want to call them, that are multi-system. System-less is different. Like if you're like, oh, you could pledge for it in TFT or pledge for it in old school. People don't like that. They get confused, and deservedly so. And it's talk about complexity, right? The number of pledges you have to offer to cover 2 systems is quite a bit more than the number that you have to offer with just one, because you have product A, product B, and then product A and B. So that
Right.
for people who play both and who might be interested in supporting both. So I ran TFT Cedra, and it was reasonably successful. Again, it was 20 or 30% lower than I'd hoped. So uh, it did what it did, and now I've got the old school essentials, because the fantasy trip and old school essentials are similar enough that it makes an easy step over, but they're actually quite different in how they play and feel. And so the conversion is non-trivial, because if you have a mid-level TFT, however many points that is, the rewards, if you have 100 silver here or 200 silver here or 1,000 silver here, uh, those are pretty good regardless, because the currency of advancement um, and getting cool stuff, I guess, is mostly not is mostly linear, right? $1,000 is always $1,000, so to speak. In BXD&D, because you get XP for gold and geometric progression and experience points between level 1 and 10, more or less. The rewards you get at first level are vastly inferior to the rewards you need at 8th level. And the challenges, the way that the sort of attritive nature of hit points and stuff. In any case, long story less long is that they really are two different things, and they play differently. And so I'm doing a separate campaign for the Old School Essentials bit, and I wanted to run it before the year ended, just to get another product. This for various reasons that don't need to go into. The number of cycles, product cycles that I had this year was probably low by a factor of 2. I usually try and turn that crank faster, but you were saying earlier how today was one problem after another. That's kind of how the year has been logistically for me. So I really wanted to get another project out there, and so I was hoping that I ran a project for the beginning of 2023 called Best Supporting Actors. Let's see if it's conveniently on my shelf. It is not. Oh, here it is. So Best Supporting Actors is 172 NPCs that you can run. You can pick to fill your adventure if you need a hireling fighter or an interesting NPC to interact with, or who's in the tavern. And here's a great example, right? The back of the book has all kinds of random tables. Who's looking for adventure, who's staying at the inn. You're looking for a sell sword for hire. Roll 1d12 to figure out who shows up. Who's drinking in the tavern, and they're all tied to the character's backstory, backstory, right? I mean, spare me the failed novelist, right? Each of these characters has a few hundred words, if that, of hook to let you know what they like, what they hate, what they're doing, what motivated them
Sure.
to adventure. But it's not 15 pages of backstory, right? Because who wants to read that? It's just enough to make them interesting, and it's a homework saver. And I thought that my solo adventures for Old School Essentials were very well received. I had 800 backers. That was a record for me, and I was kind of hoping that the Best Supporting Actors would do it, and that was what, 375 or something. So that was really not the product for the time. And I was saying, okay, well, how about a setting, another solo, and an adventure? And I launched that on Thursday. And maybe it's too close to Christmas. Maybe it's inflation. Maybe it's just wants the wrong product. But got off to a bit of a slow roll. And some of it has been a little of some of the social media companies that I've been traditionally using to get the word out have started to throttle back on self-promotion, which understandable. But that's one of these things where, if you have someone who's going to say, hey, everyone needs to go check out Doug's stuff, that works. If I go onto somewhere and say, hey, I had this thing that you might like, it's, oh, you're self-promoting your band, which is less fun.
Who's doing that?
Oh, I got kicked out of Reddit RPG for violating their terms. It's a million people, and I was like, oh, I figured I was doing something interesting. But in fairness to them, they have a rule, and I violated it. So, as I wasn't posting a lot to that particular group, so it was self promo without giving back. So they warned me once, and I thought that I'd given enough space between posts. And some of this, I'm like, hey, I have my, every couple of weeks in gaming Ballistic, what's going on inside an indie studio. And I sort of look at that as inside baseball. Like, hey, if you're interested in the industry, this is what it takes to attempt to make it as a business rather than as a oh, I wrote a book and it's just a side gig sort of thing, but I'm trying to make this work for real. But that was considered self promo, which I get again. But yeah, so it's just one of those things where the things have become a little more fragmented, and I feel like the part of it is honestly, I used to be able to send out like either MailChimp or Constant Contact, some sort of mailing, and everyone would see it. And I feel like over the last couple of years, the companies have gotten really good at redirecting business mail that I think people might be interested in to spam. And that's a little bit of woe is me, right? But the fact of the matter is, if I can't put my product in front of people who want it, they're not going to come buy it. And so I feel like I have a reach problem that I need to overcome if I'm going to be successful.
Well, that's why we're going to give you the Geek Gab bump. I'm only partially facetious. Actually, we have awesome viewers, but like you said, you're 2/3 of the way funded.
I am. I will admit and if we fund, right, that's right. The books, that's the thing. Cedric exists, and in TFT, I will do the work. If we fund, I will do the work to convert it. It will be worthwhile to me. It will help me get some of my next stuff going. What would really help me get my next stuff going is 400 or 500 backers would push me. It would give me the working capital and the underpinning to simultaneously develop something on the order of 4 or 5 different books right out of the gate in parallel rather than sequentially. And when you can do that, it starts to become self-sustaining because one leads into the next rapidly. And as someone that I worked with briefly, who was the chief financial officer of Bell Helicopter, was like, "This ain't rocket science, boys. Margin times turns in this business." So if your margin is mediocre, because role-playing games are not exactly selling software for free, right? Right, because publishing role-playing games is not a huge margin business. A lot of it has to do with how many times you can leverage your working capital, unless you have until you have a breakout success, in which case your working capital is so well established that you really can do it all before it actually hits market. The only thing that you really need for the Kickstarter or crowdfunding is the size of the print run, and that's mostly what people who are established and getting thousands of backers in every product is all they're really doing, is seeing how big a print run that they need to do, because no one wants to carry extra inventory. It's very expensive. Even if you buy it all and do it cash like I do, then you don't want to carry too much inventory, because once you do the Kickstarter, this proverbial long tail is not right. That's the way that the industry works these days. Unless you're one of the few companies that has core rules that are evergreen, and there aren't that many of them. And if you're doing, if you're depreciating inventory, then you pay for inventory, right? There's a carrying cost that you have to pay. So in either case, you never want to order so many books. Like my first, you guys interview me about Dragon Heresy, my 5e fantasy heartbreaker a long time ago. I have 1,000 copies of that still sitting in a warehouse in Tennessee.
Oh no.
Or something like that. Well, because it was a rookie mistake, right? It was my first big book. It turned out really well. Really, it's pretty. It's level 5. Goes, here's a cool cover and nice, great production values and offset print
for it.
Yeah, a lot of art that I commissioned for it and whatever, and so it's and it plays well. It's D&D but better. It's a classic fantasy heartbreaker, and of course, better that's always the mission statement of these fantasy heartbreakers, right? I'm being self-deprecating. I feel like it's a good game and it plays well, but everyone has one. And this was mine. And at the time, I wasn't doing this as a business. I'm going to make a big, darn colorful, awesome, high production value book. Actually, originally I was going to do three: player book, DM book, monster book, um, and then an RPG luminary. I was put in contact with an RPG luminary whose name will not be mentioned. By Rob Conley of Bat in the Attic, whose name will be mentioned because I love Rob. But he's like, oh, you should talk to this guy because he knows the stuff. And so I talked to this guy, and the guy is like, nobody ever listens to me when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Don't do this. You're walking in. You're about to stick your hand into a meat grinder because you have no name. No one knows who you are. Both of these things are true. They may still be true enough, but both of these, like, nobody really knows who you are. You don't have an established track record of doing this stuff. And you say you've got 800 pages of material. Great. Nobody's going to believe that you're going to be able to deliver three 250-page books or 275 or whatever. No one is going to believe that you're going to be capable of doing that, even if you are. So this is going to be a catastrophic failure. So don't. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to ask an expert a question, I might as well listen to the advice. And that's actually what led to Dungeon Grappling, my first Kickstarter. He's like, well, what do you have in that book that you can take out and prove that you can do it? And I was like, well, I have this and I have this. And one of the thises was actually a modified domain system that Alex had put up and said, oh, this is an alternate rule that didn't get into the book, but here it is, public domain, open, OGL. And I modified it and used it to help set up my world, and it works great. And he's like, oh, you should do that. I'm like, no, that's basically kickstarting somebody else's stuff. That's not right. I may use it with his permission, but I'm not going to try and kickstart it as its own product. That's lame, or sleazy, I guess, would be rather than lame. But I was like, oh, I have this grappling thing. It's like, oh, well, then do that. And I did that, and it's really gone on to be probably still my best-selling product. If you take cumulative sales, it's also had the most time at it. So, but Dungeon Grappling,
awesome.
Come again?
Because it's awesome.
It's good. It's grappling rules that don't suck. Is my one sentence pitch. But in any case, the point is that led me to condense the books from level 1 through level 23 D&D size books to level 1 through 5, which has that precarious feel of old school D&D while still doing some of the new mechanics, and there were some other things that I did in the book. But the point is that the Kickstarter went and it funded for the offset print run at the last minute, and literally the last minute, last 15 minutes, someone pledged $1,000 to buy 2 of my shields, because I had shields as a reward in the United States, and they're like, oh, I'll take 2 shields at $500 a piece. And so it went from not quite making it to making it. And then as I was making the how many books do I buy decision, I made the mistake of marginal cost. I'm like, well, the minimum order is 1,000, and that's this much money, but it's so little money to get 1,500 instead. And surely I will sell through the extra 500. Well, that didn't happen.
Womp womp.
Yeah, so I still have 900 or 850 or 1,000 or whatever books sitting in a warehouse in Tennessee, and the only reason they're still there is that I don't have anywhere to put them.
Oh.
It's 100 boxes of 10 books apiece, or thereabouts, and even if I wanted to pay to bring them here, I'm not sure where I would stack that many cubic feet of books. If I ever wind up having a little bit of an uptick in my business and I have more inventory, I'll get a storage locker somewhere, fill it with shelves, and then bring them so that I have all of my But that was also an experience where the it's sitting actually at a distributor, and I get a couple of sales periodically from this. But that was a real uh, lesson in the new model for small. It used to be you had to have a distributor, right? Well, that's just anti the case these days. The only reason you go with a distributor is if you really, really, really don't want to handle all the volume, but it comes at a ferocious price. Um, because of the you've put somebody between you and the retailer, even, and the retailer just wants 50% off or 30% off or whatever, and then the distributor takes a fraction of that. So you really need to be moving so many that you just can't handle doing it yourself, and that has never really been the case for me.
And like you said, I mean, this is RPG stuff that you're never going to move tons and tons of stuff.
Well, I beg to differ, but so I mean, the plan is to move tons and tons of stuff. I would love to have that problem, but the fact of the matter is I don't. Right? It's just a matter of realism rather than optimism. I'd love to move thousands of books, and if I did, distribution and if I had that kind of volume and were able to maintain it through support materials, then distribution or direct sales or getting somebody else to handle my warehousing and reshipping and stuff would make all the sense in the world. At the moment, it's still much more efficient for me to pick and pack and store my stuff for my Kickstarters, and that's probably true up to 3, 4, 500 copies that I'm doing personally. I had somebody else fulfill my bestiary and almost killed me because the costs were higher than quoted and uh, uh, bad things happened, right? So, and that was the big freight debacle. So it was one thing after another. Everything was more expensive. But that's the thing, is that if you handle it yourself, you know exactly where all your costs are. You're never gonna if you're doing planning if you're doing your spreadsheet management worth the damn, you'll know where those are and you'll have planned them ahead of time. You're gonna, like Sun Tzu says, you'll do many calculations in your temple ahead of time.
It's amazing. Um, Once again, and even though we go years between this, it always blows me away how little I know about running these things as a business. Um, but what would you say, talking about all the big mistakes that you make, um, have you wrapping up the year here, have you made any mistakes or have you done any learning today? Like, what's 2023 taught you in terms of
Oof.
running this?
2023. 2023 has really taught me that I really thought that splitting my aim at, and I still think it's not wrong. I just think that the year's been rough for everybody. But I started off with an old school essentials project, the best supporting actors. Then I was going to do the project that turned into Isle of Cedra for TFT, but that set of manuscripts got delayed. I was able to pull in a Dungeon Fantasy role playing game pair of books, my Artifacts of Legend, Artifacts of Saga books, which probably the most gorgeous interiors of any books that I've done to date. They're awesome. The art team just knocked it out of the park. But those two, I pulled in the manuscript because I had a draft manuscript that got set aside for reasons. There were things I wanted to do with it. The author didn't want to do the same thing, right? Anyway, so we were like, yeah, we're not going to be able to meet on this and go forward. But at some point, I purchased rights to the original manuscript because I'm like, I think there's something there. I just don't have time to do it right now. But I bought the manuscript. I had to hire a collaborator, pulled that in. When I saw that the manuscripts for Cedra weren't going to come in on time, I pulled in Artifacts, set it up, launched it, ran it, fulfilled it, and then I was still looking to say, okay, now what now? And that became TFT Cedra, but that was a bit of a slow roll for various reasons. And so the real kicker over and over and over again that I find is if I'm going to outsource manuscripts and stuff, I better have a couple in my pocket to in case things move around. So so I did supporting actors, artifacts, call it Cedra one, Cedra TFT, and now Cedra uh, OSE, and really I needed at least two more projects in there that were targeted well enough to make it. The none of the projects that I ran this year uh, were spectacularly better than kind of the minimum viable backer count, right? None of them helped me self-sustain, and that was the rough learning. You saying, okay, well, hopefully this last one was an anomaly. I got 375 instead of 550, or I got 500 instead of 750, or whatever. What was artifacts? Artifacts was yeah, 425, right? And so for old school essentials and TFT, the minimum viable product is lower because it's black and white. So the art's less expensive, the printing is less expensive. And with artifacts and the Dungeon Fantasy role playing game stuff, it's color. So everything's a little bit more expensive. And so the minimum viable product where you break even and start generating a surplus of funds that you can either have payroll or turn back into your business as working capital is higher. For the color stuff, I think it's between 475 and 550. And fewer on shorter projects. The artifacts wound up being, I think, almost 96 pages of content in the end.
Wow.
Between the two. Originally they were going to be shorter, but I have this thing, and it's not, it's always good for the backer, but I'm like, I'm going to let the book be what it needs to be. And I usually, it's a very price sensitive market, and so I usually try and over deliver a little bit, because if you're like, oh, I'm going to price this as what I hope it grows into, people get mad, and probably deservedly so. But anyway, so the biggest thing that hit me this year was boy, it's just really just if I can't if I can't have the milkshake that brings the backers to the yard, and I am the wrong guy to be saying that. I have no rhythm whatsoever. But if I can't bring the audience, it doesn't matter what I'm making. And I really, in order to make color stuff, I really need to be pushing 550, 600 people, and for the black and white, between 4 and 500, and I'm coming up short. And what winds up happening there is not so much that I can't continue, although it's close. It's that I can't do any parallel development. I can't have the next thing basically ready while the first thing is being fulfilled, sort of thing, and you really need to look at what Phil Reed does. I mean, I think he's run 462 Kickstarters this year. I don't know if you've seen it, but he recently posted some sort of update, and I swear he's done one or two projects per month in 2023.
Wow.
It's a lot of them are small. I mean, he's not making 300-page tomes, but he's the special exception that Kickstarter says, how many projects can you run at once? And for Phil, the answer is all of them, because he just boom, 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 and they're all PDF, and he's got a great following, and his work is pretty, right? It's got great shelf appeal, and he's got a following that is absolutely interested in what he's doing. So he's got that thing, and if you're doing talk about margin times turns, right? If he Alec, I have no idea what his business model looks like, but if he were to make 10% or 20% on a $10,000 working capital, right? So he turns 10,000 into 2,000 in profit. Well, if you turn that crank 24 times, right? If you turn a $2,000 profit 24 times, you've taken $10,000 working capital and made almost 50 grand of it. It's a 400% rate of return, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just turn it, you don't need to have a $1.4 million Kickstarter. You'll want one, because who doesn't? But you know, if you can cycle, every project still needs to be successful, but it doesn't need to carry writing and then development and then marketing and then art and then whatever, and hopefully that makes it. And if it does okay but not great, then you do the next one. And that's really the where I was, right? I will have done 4 projects this year, and really I needed to do 6 to 8. And I had 6 to 8 in my schedule.
Right.
But because, you know, I'm like, you know, and it's this thing, like, so let's take this project that I'm doing right now, right? I've got 107 people, you know, maybe almost like just over $1,100. Like if I get 20 backers, I fund. Okay. So let's say I'm here on day 4 or 5, right? Let's say that what I had hoped happened, and I launch with 200 backers, $12,000. I get more than 50% funding. So what do I do immediately when that happens? I get to work. It's funded, the money's going to come in, and I get to work, and I just crank as hard as I can so that the product is ready basically before the Kickstarter ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do something else as I'm waiting for Kickstarter to fund and do the backer kit and this and the other thing. I'm doing something else, and I know what's coming, and so I may be spending a little bit more than what's in my kitty, but I don't have to worry because I know what's coming, right? And as the Kickstarter goes, and you know, maybe I get 400 backers, and I'm getting about $60 a pledge here or so, so it's $24,000, and I know what to do with that because I have the spreadsheets, and I know, okay, here comes this, and here comes this, and my working capital, if it does this, is going to be this much, and so I can spend that. I can hire artists, or I can contract out the companion volume to Cedra, which is Elazar. Because so I've got these solo adventures that I did, old school solos, which did very, very well for me, ridiculously well for me. Best campaign ever for me, both in terms of, well, in every metric. Right, I was very pleased and gratified that they did as well as they did. So it was 4 solo adventures, kind of choose your own style in old school essentials. People liked them. They've been reviewed very well. And they're fun to play. And where was I going with this? And so, you know, you have a success like that, and then you want to do more, right? But it funded in like an hour, right? And so I immediately was able to get to work. Oh, I know what it was. Those solos, Dragon Hunt and Vampire Hunter Belladonna, are set in Cedra. They actually effectively mapped out the island before David started turning it into a setting, right? Now, there are 2 others, Dark Lord's Doom and Till Death Do Us Part. Those are set on an island, a day or day and a half sail south and west of Cedra, which is called Elazar. And you know, they interact, but these 2 solos really set the stage for what Elazar is going to be. If this particular project did really well, I could just, and I told David I was going to get to it today, but I didn't. This weekend got away from me a little bit, but anyway, so we've already planned Elazar the setting, a solo adventure sort of to be named later, a supporting adventure, which is already written. Um, and if I knew that I had the working capital to do this, I would contract with him for that. I would pay the advance, like I pay him advances on the writing. Um, and he's secure because he's got advances cash in his pocket. I'm secure because I know I've got money coming in, and I've got 3 books coming. Or 4 if I'm like, oh, things are done really well, we should do this too, and we schedule them out through the year. We know that they're coming, um, and then I can say that's great. That puts these products here, and then I can say, well, what else can I do? And I say, well, gee, I am going to, well, I'm writing what's called the Mission X role playing game, which is a powered by GURPS standalone RPG. I have a contract for that. That was announced in 2020, but my market didn't grow to the point where I thought that it was going to be really sustainable. But I'm shooting for the moon, and I'm writing it. It's kind of more military parts of Stargate SG-1 meets XCOM 2 meets a little bit of Old Man's War by John Scalzi, the first book, rather than some of the later ones. The later ones are good books too, but the first one had a great feel to it. A little bit of aliens, some bug hunting going on. So it's that genre of you know, if dungeon fantasy role playing game is go deep into dungeons, kill things and take their stuff. This is sort of go into the universe and meet hostile aliens and get their tech for setting related reasons. But it's going to have its own engine. I'm writing that right now, and I could dig into that. But I could also convert my Nordland setting to TFT or old school essentials, right? And I could do that confident that I can get advanced art going. I could talk to other people and say, hey, I want you to do totally not ancient Egypt or totally not Far East settings, right? Been talking to a few people about different things. um,
And the gist of that would be that is the sort of stuff that you would be able to set up multiple projects in parallel
Correct.
because
And
of
then
that.
and then
Yeah.
it's like boom, 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 boom. And that's kind of what happened to me a little bit. Not as much as I wanted to, but it happened a little bit in 2022 where at any given moment I was still paying myself some money, not a ton, but at any given moment almost everything was reinvested in development. And at the end a bunch of things happened and I ran out of development, which is great, which was good because then it was like, oh, this project, this project, and this project, and I get to keep that money
Mhm.
because I was rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling, and I did 6 or 7 or whatever projects in that year, or 6 or 7 books, maybe fewer projects, um, but that was it came out in at the end, and it's like, oh, look, here it is. But that's the kind of thing that having the working capital does for you is that I've always got something to release. I've always got something to excite people. I can jump back and forth between markets. Oh, here's TFT, and that doesn't have hardly any overlap with OSE. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Um, Dungeon Fantasy role playing game doesn't overlap with 5th edition much, and so I could go bip 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 bip, and I'm not raiding the same people's pocketbook twice in a row, which is nice for their wallet. But and good for sales too, right? You don't want to be like, well, I'd love to support your stuff, but I just supported your stuff. Um, so that's the kind of thing where if you can keep the crank turning, um, you may need to kind of push the wave ahead of you like a tsunami, but it breaks at the end, and it's good. Um, this year it was kind of a low ripple because I didn't have enough momentum to get the really it's like a fission reaction, right? You get to critical mass and it self-sustains, and that's what all businesses are trying to do is they get to a place where you've got enough customers and enough product that if a couple things happen below the waterline, it's fine, and you can still shift and move and make things happen.
I feel you. Go ahead.
Real quick,
Yeah.
we are moving towards being out of time, so I just wanted to ask, uh, what about the Isle of Cedra would be, uh, as a setting? Why would somebody want to add that to their game? What is compelling about the Isles of Cedra as a? I'm just asking you to sell it.
No, that's right. It's a couple things. First of all, uh, it's got all the makings of something where you've got enough going on that you can sandbox it, right? So it's got a couple of different pseudo-European or Gothic entities. It's got some stuff that's kind of got some Far East influence. It's got your totally not ancient Egypt in the desert. So it's got a lot of great locales, none of which are like, the 10,000-mile desert of the steppes of Galjabar or something. So it's something that you can embrace the entire setting, and it's all interesting. You can have an entire adventure in one city if you want, but it's got a lot of factional interplay, and because of the way it's set up, it's actually relatively low population, so the players can really have an impact in a way that being like 2 or 3 actors in out of millions um, can't. Right? I mean, the entire population of the setting is something like the population of Minnesota. Um, uh, so it's something where you really can be have an impact in the factional relations, and there's no good guys and bad guys. You could play anything you want. There's realms and they have interests, and who's doing what to whom is reasonably well out there. So I feel like it's a great thing where you could sail away from your existing campaign, sail up to Cedra, interact with things, have some great adventures, some of which can be made for you, some of which you can do by yourself. um, and it's got enough to hang a lot of adventure on, but it's not like, it's the other thing, and this is the whole concept of the infinite archipelago. As long as you've got a bit of ocean somewhere, you can plunk this down in the middle of it, and have a new place to go if your campaign is feeling a little stale.
Love it.
All right, and
Right, so go ahead.
the reason why we didn't have you when we first started the show, and we've mentioned this a little bit, is that you make Viking shields, and you went and got one to show to the audience. Can we
Sure,
pull
sure.
out that
So
Viking
y-
shield?
yeah, so this is my shield. I've been using it for a couple years in class, um, but it is pretty authentic, um, and it weighs about 6 pounds. It's poplar. Uh, the planks are glued together with hide glue, faced and backed, and edged with rawhide. Um, and it's relatively authentically constructed. I cheated a little bit, um, but it's about the right size, half my height and weight, for a real thing. And I've been using it in some Viking sword and shield classes for the better part of God, longer than I want to say 2 years, but we had COVID in there, so I was doing so probably now like 4 years. So this thing is the first really authentic shield that I ever made, and it's still with me.
That's amazing.
And
Yeah.
are
So
you going to be offering those as part of this Kickstarter too?
no, 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 no. A couple of reasons why. One of them, amusingly enough, is it's cold outside these days, and I when I make these, I need the space to set up the tools and stuff. And right now, I've got a snowblower where my clamp array would be. But in general, the I did the shield stuff early on, and it was one of those things. I thought that people might be thought that they were cool. I even make I make practice swords too. So this one is an all wood weight called a waster, but it's the right size. But this one is actually interesting. This is my personal one. It's got a brass stock in here, so it's more balanced. So this actually weighs the same as this, which is my Arms and Armor.
Oh, cool.
I call my Arms and Armor. I call it the Schiffwald. It's a semi-custom. It's the blade is from one type of sword, and the grip is from their Schiffered, because I like the Viking grip is sort of required, and it has a hilt to the right size. But it's actually hard to find Viking sword hilts that are not ahistorically long. But this one is 2.5 pounds. So this is like probably a pound, pound and a half, and that's fairly typical for this is made out of hickory. This is also made out of hickory, but because it's got brass in the hilt and the lower blade, it's got a balance point, although not a percussion point, a lot more similar to a real sword. So if you're training with wood, this makes a much better sword simulator. But it's when I get when writing and running a game business, I need to take a step back and clear my head. I like to do woodworking.
I love it. Thanks for showing us that. It's always
Sure.
cool to see that.
Yeah.
The
Oh, and here's a
swords and
scabbard
shield.
that I'm making. This is my very first scabbard. It's too thick. Oh, and the glue that I used for the linen covering is coming off, which is because it's some modern glue. Ancient glues don't fail. Ancient glues last 1,000 years. Modern glues break. But at some point, I will wrap this in leather. My first try at cutting the leather wrapping didn't work quite as well as I like, so I need to try it again. I just need some time. But once I do it, I'll stitch it together, and it's got a wool lining and fits and all that stuff. And then that'll be my version 1. But
Awesome. All right. Do you have anything? Any last words before
we sign up? I would truly appreciate your pledge to OSC Cedra. Actually, I have one other thing that I want to say after that. But the OSC Cedra needs about 20 people to fund. It's a great setting. David did a great job. It's not. I don't find it overwritten at all. It's got just enough. It's got all the meat you'd want without a lot of blah 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 blah. Interesting characters, great factions. Glenn Seal of Monkey Blood did the maps for me. He and I have been working together for years now. He does fantastic work. The art team for both character sketches and visualization and images, illustrations did good. So they're really nice. The cover artist really did quite well especially this thing. So it's a good project. It will be ready quite quickly. I think just if 20 people come by and pledge at the typical rates that they've been doing, and if I've got 6 or 8 different old school essentials books that are available all at once, and so I would truly appreciate the pledges because I could use them and it would really 20 will get me funded. 200 would be spectacular because that would really kickstart 2024, and I've got a lot planned. Expansion to Elazar and more. One last thing, Steve Jackson Games has a bundle of holding going for like everything in the Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game in the PDF space. If you get the biggest bundle, it works out to be like 75 to 85% off. It's crazy good. But in combination with that, I put all 19, technically 20 if you count the Portuguese one, PDFs that I have on my Shopify site, gaming-ballistic.myshopify.com. All the PDFs are 50% off, and all the physical or physical plus PDFs are 25% off. And that runs for the next month. So if you're into Dungeon Fantasy role-playing game or think you might be, this is the time to get the PDFs from the bundle of holding. And if you want a fully worked setting with tons of adventures and extra materials and one of the things that they say about GURPS is it's hard to get into. Well, I've got a set of 4 books called Delvers to Grow, which does 62, 125, and 187 point characters. And I once for a convention put together 30 pre-gen characters in 5 hours, which sounds like a lot, except if you do the math, that's 10 minutes apiece for a fully fleshed out GURPS character. So it's fast. It's TFT fast. It's OSE fast. It's a modular design without losing any choices. I've got 320 pages of full color monster manuals on sale. 5 different adventures of various point values that go up to 128 pages. Nordvorn is a mini setting. So I've got a lot of great material for that at a really substantial discount. So even if you don't decide that you want to go pledge for Cedra, but you should, you check out the DFRPG bundle of holding and my sale at my website. So that is what I'll end with.
Okay.
Wow, great talking to you. That's pretty much all I have to say. Glad you could make it back to the show.
No,
And,
thanks for the invite. And I know that it can be rather quick, but I appreciate the time. Excuse me.
Yeah, best of luck with that Kickstarter. Can't wait to see what you're doing in 2024.
Thank you.
Yeah, I regret that we didn't have you back on sooner. So thanks for agreeing to come on, and I really hope your Kickstarter goes well. And we appreciate you coming on to talk about it.
Thank you.
So let's just say I thank everyone who is listening live, and I want to thank everyone who will listen later. This has been Geek Gab for Monday, December 11th, 2023. We're available on youtube.com/geekgab. Once again, that's youtube.com/geekgab. Or you can get us on soundcloud.com, on the Google Play Store, or on the Apple iTunes Store. Just do a search for Geek Gab, and you can find us to download to the device of your choice, save us to your computer, or listen to us on the web. We are available all those places just for you. Folks, we are signing out for today, but don't you worry, don't you fret. We will be back.